The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Frankly Speaking. I'm your host today, Frank Zaberick, and I'm pretty excited. As I mentioned before, well, I probably mentioned several times on this show that I like to take my summer vacation in August, the first weekend in August, to Gunstock Ski Resort. They have a Christian music festival there called Soulfest. And usually when I go there, there's a lot of kiosk and display tables with a lot of interesting organizations. And a lot of times I, kind of mingle with some of the people behind these display tables. And I find a lot of interesting testimony. And I was fortunate with my guest today of a group called His Mansion Ministries, which I think they help out people who are caught up in the substance abuse problem in New Hampshire. I guess kids, young people 18 through 35, I believe, is their range. But and another thing I really love about this group, His Mansion, when it comes to getting people guests on my show, they were more than willing to come down in droves. Well, I got 3 guests here today. Usually it's like pulling teeth to get 1 guest, but I was especially blessed to have 3 guests. And that's all the more testimony we can have today to kind of enhance, what His Mansion Ministries are all about. And I guess, so first of all, I guess we'll go around after we introduce everybody and they give a little testimony about what their positions are with His Mansion. I think we'll go to jump ball style, where I'll ask questions and then you guys can arm wrestle or something like that on who answers them. But that's neither here nor there. So my first guest, Heidi Johnson, the lady among this group today, and your title is External Relations / Outreach Coordinator. So, and also, aside from telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with His Mansion Ministries, can you tell us is there a story behind how the name His Mansion came into fruition?
Sure, I'd love to tell you that.
Sure.
His Mansion Ministries was an idea composed of by 3 different gentlemen who had a heart for God and a heart for individuals who were coming out of the drug crisis back in the 70s. And these 3 gentlemen decided to start bringing people into their homes. And the problem was that they would leave and go to work in the morning, and the drug addict would still be lying on the couch with the moms trying to raise their little children. And so the wives said, husbands, this is a great idea, but you need a place. And so they went out searching for a place. And God eventually led them to an old mansion, old Victorian mansion. And that's where they opened the doors in 1972. A little old lady heard their story and said, I'd like you to buy my place. It wasn't the asking price, but it was the price that she wanted to receive, even though it wasn't as much as she was asking for, because she believed in the vision and the purpose of the ministry. So that's where we started. And it had a long name that was an acrostic for the word Christ, too long for anyone to ever remember. So people always just referred to it as the mansion. Oh. So we decided to name it His Mansion after God's mansion. So his mansion, that's how we got our name. And then in 1979, we moved to where we are right now, which is Deering, New Hampshire, and 316 acres of wooded property, beautiful nature, place of serenity and peace. And that's where we have our residents and our servant leaders and staff live.
So how many residents at a time is, well, I think you're going to mention there's like 3 cycles of like groups that come in at various times in the year. How many can stay there at one time?
So we have different amounts for men and women, and it's dependent on how many servant leaders we have, how many staff we have. So we could hold up to 16 women and 32 men. So that's our desire, and that's what we're praying to, that we can have that many at some point in the near future.
Okay. So how did you get involved with his mansion? Did you just like apply for a job, or how did that work out?
Well, it's interesting how God works in our stories. It actually was a childhood friend of my mother's who first told me about his mansion. So I'm from Minnesota.
Oh.
And my mother grew up in Illinois, and a friend of hers that she grew up with was affiliated with a church that one of the former staff members attended. She knew my heart for hurting people. And so she told me about his mansion, suggested that I ought to visit it sometime. And I thought, sure, I'll just pop on over to New Hampshire from Minnesota. But God worked in a certain way with my desires, and I ended up going for about 2 months. Went through a 1-week training program, followed by the internship, and it was a fabulous experience. I felt like God was calling me at that time to come, but it wasn't the right time for him. It took another 10 years. And that in itself is a fun God story as well, but I'll save you all the details.
Oh.
And 10 years later, God opened the door for me to come. And I first started working with David when I came in the summer of 2014. Yeah. And worked with him and the SLs, the servant leaders. And then I came back 2 years later as full-time staff in the area of external relations.
Wow. Amazing. Okay, so moving right along, left to right on your TV screen, we have with us Abe Stegall, and you're the men's program administrator. I don't know if that's a specific title or a men's program administrator. And you're also a former resident of the His Mansion Ministry program.
Yes, sir.
So how did you come about to get involved with His Mansion?
Well, essentially I came as a resident. I came with a pretty severe substance abuse problem. I came to get help. It was kind of the last chance for me in a lot of ways. I came out of a long addiction, 20 years of addiction. So when I came, I was in a pretty bad place. So I came, I completed the residential program, and basically it changed my life, or God changed my life. God really met me in that. I grew up in a Christian home, but had fallen away from my Christian upbringing a long, long time ago. And when I came to His Mansion, I was kind of reintroduced to Christ through the people around me. By getting to know them, I really began to know the character of God again. And eventually I did well enough in the program that they asked me to come back as what they call a servant leader, which is someone who lives with the residents, leads them on work crew, provides accountability, things like that, but also is there to be a friend, an encourager, someone to lean on when it's tough, because it can get tough when you're dealing with things like that. And as a servant leader, I learned a ton. It really opens you up to experience service or serving others in a way that I had never, undertaken before. And so after about 8 months of doing that, a need arose within the ministry, and I got the opportunity to join the staff as the men's program administrator. And essentially, it's still a way to serve the men who come through the program, and just like I was, very broken people, in need of a new perspective and a new way of life, and through the program, I think that they learn how to allow God to take control of their life and allow God to do incredible things in their life. And so I'm lucky enough that I get to watch the men and women kind of go from being very, very broken when they come in, with all kinds of problems and trauma, to being, a more perfect picture of what God intended when He created us. So obviously, don't get there all the way, but it's amazing to see the smiles come back to people's faces, and to see people be able to ease the burdens that they're carrying, and put down some of the things that they've been clinging to their whole lives, whether that be trauma from the past or hurts from the past or addiction, and kind of step forward into something brand new.
One thing we were talking off camera, I want to bring up, because I was just under the impression before you guys came here today that his mansion just catered to people who were like drug and alcohol addicted. But I think you told me that it also helps out with people who go under depression, eating disorders, bad traumas in their life. So it goes toward depression and anxiety disorders too, as well as drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people come with a wide range of problems that have kind of led them to seek help, and led them to seek the Lord in a very specific kind of way. So, we get people with all kinds of issues with addiction, whether that be substance abuse or something else. And we also get people who have experienced really, really hard lives and have really, really deep wounds that they're trying to heal from. And a lot of times are traumatized. And a lot of that stuff goes hand in hand, because the truth is that the lifestyle of the addicted person almost always leads to trauma and to pain and hurt that you're going to wind up dealing with the rest of your life. And in a lot of ways, that stuff will keep you addicted. It will keep you sick. Those hurts and those scars that we kind of accumulate over years of living in a really bad environment. The only way we know to cope with that kind of hurt is to rely on the addiction that got us there. So it's a really vicious cycle, and I think people learn how to kind of break through that.
Okay. So last but by no means least on our panel, going left to right on your TV set, or maybe right to left, whatever, is David McHale, and you're the director of Servant Leader Program. So, David, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with His Mansion Ministries.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, outside of Chicago, and went to school at Wheaton College from 2008 to 2012. Graduated there after I had done an internship at His Mansion in between my junior and senior year at Wheaton, and really loved it. And so that following summer, basically, there was a discernment process of discerning really what the Lord was calling me to do in that season. And I was drawn to his mansion because of really the draw that I felt toward people that were in anguish and who were in bondage and who were in a lot of pain, and saw the way that the Lord moved toward them as well, and really had a heart to preach God's grace in that space. I also have had a lot of loved ones, dear people in my life that have struggled a lot with substance abuse and alcohol abuse, and so my heart was drawn to the place, to the people, and so I came on as basically an assistant to one of our directors, worked with our internships, and along the way, we started to develop a little bit more of a substantial program in the servant leader program. And I've been responsible for that along the way, and then now supervising it at this point.
So when you were going to Wheaton College, were you a pastoral major, a ministry major?
I was a Christian education major,
Okay.
Or a Christian formation and ministry major with a Bible theology minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I was kind of that concerned me that I saw on your website is that to become a resident of his mansion program, that you have to go through two separate interviews. And also, I think they sort of discourage people who are court appointed. I mean, there's some programs, rehab programs, that you could go to them in lieu of going to prison or something like that, saying, put me in this program to rehab. But it sounds like his mansion sort of frowns away from people in that situation.
Well, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that his mansion is looking to help people who want to get help. You know what I mean? I think that you got to want it. You got to want it for yourself, and you got to want to be there. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the program doesn't help people who are in legal trouble if people want to get help on their own. For instance, I wasn't court appointed to be there, but I was in a lot of legal trouble when I came as a resident. And the court didn't make any promises to me about going to his mansion. There was no promise of less time on probation or a lighter sentence or no jail time or anything like that. I just knew that I needed help and I wanted to come. And I knew that if I stayed out on the street, that essentially I would wind up, I was on probation and I would wind up serving my underlying sentence because I had already violated my probation a number of times. I was in a really bad place. I just couldn't stay clean. I couldn't keep myself from getting into trouble. So I don't think that his mansion shies away from helping people who have experienced legal problems, but I think they do shy away from bringing in people who don't necessarily want to be there for the right reasons. And I think that that's good. If you want to get clean, you got to want it for yourself. And people that don't necessarily want that aren't always the best fit for our program.
Yeah, and I would say, Frank, I mean, there's a couple things going on. I mean, the first of which is along the lines of what Abe was saying in terms of, we have young men or young women that have parents that really want them to get help. And if their parents are the ones that are making them get help, then
they're not ready for it.
They're not ready for it, and they're not going to have very much investment in the process, much commitment, if you will. And so same thing with somebody that's being kind of ordered by somebody else, whether it's the courts or somebody else, to go and do this program. It doesn't really end up yielding very good results. And even more so, part of the interview process is also to vet whether we are going to be able to help the person, because we have limits as a ministry. And there are other places, other care facilities, if you will, that can provide the care that people need. And so part of the interview process is discerning whether somebody is a good fit for us and whether we're a good fit for them.
I see. Okay, so the rest of these questions here, I guess, will be like jump ball style. I guess you guys can arm wrestle or something if you want to answer them. No, I'm only kidding. But so what does a typical day look like at his mansion from sunup to sundown?
Well, I guess I'll probably answer this one since I went through the residential program. I might be able to provide some unique insight. But so you wake up at 6:30. Quiet time every day from 6:30 or from early in the morning till about 7:20. You have a half an hour that you spend doing devotional, reading your Bible, that kind of thing. From there, you go to breakfast. After breakfast is either work or a class. So work usually lasts till about 11:30, and then you have prayer and share. And we have different types of groups in the afternoon, either that or work crew in the afternoon. And each day is a little bit different. The schedule varies from day to day, but the days are primarily taken up through work crew and through class time work.
Yeah, and I would say along those lines, a typical day is very intentional. So the way that we have crafted the schedule is intentional. We don't just do things to do them. We really believe that we are shaped and formed by both our environment, the kind of relationships we have with each other, as well as the kind of practices that we do throughout the day. So even within our meal structure, there's basically practices, even within a single meal, that are supposed to help people learn how to be considerate of other people, how to be respectful, how to care for each other, how to meet the needs of the person next to you, rather than just thinking about myself and how good this food tastes to me, and how hungry I am, but really considering other people. And really our whole schedule, our whole typical day is really oriented around putting in place practices for people to do that are along those lines, forming them in that way.
So when you're talking about like a classroom or a discussion or something like that, are you more or less like getting into like how to get their GED for people who don't have their GEDs yet? Or you're talking about mostly how did I get into addiction in the first place, and how, what can I do to, stay sober from here on out type thing?
Well, I would say that really it's neither one of those things necessarily. I think that we do spend some time talking about maybe our past and the kind of underlying issues that fuel our addiction at times. But I think a lot of it is spiritual work and learning how, learning where our relationships have been broken and learning how to repair those relationships, not only with other people, but with God. And really it's about discipleship. It's about learning a completely new and different way of thinking and a different way of living, which, goes far beyond just the practical steps of like getting a GED and things like that. So, a lot of your shorter term programs will slap a Band-Aid on a problem, like get you enrolled in a GED program or something like that. His Mansion is a year-long program that really addresses the spiritual deficiencies which really cause us to become sick and which fuel our addiction. So those are the kind of things that we try to address in the program.
And what I would add to that, Frank, is, we really believe at His Mansion that the problem that people are facing is not they don't know what to do. The problem is in the heart. And really the program and the classes that we have are really trying to engage the heart, as well as our actions and learning things to do. But and we also believe that the context of growth and recovery is in relationship with the people around us. So our first phase is all about building relationships with each other, learning how to trust, learning how to love, and in that finding hope in the midst of kind of their difficulties, if you will. And then our phase 2 is really a lot of prayer and a lot of receiving from the Lord, kind of like what Abe was saying in terms of the spiritual kind of healing that we really believe is essential if somebody wants to grow out of addiction, and then really learning how to give that to other people in discipleship via sacrifice and service.
I would assume in a program like yours, you would have strict rules when it comes to visitation. Your mother could probably visit your sister, but your quote-unquote friends, I don't know if you'd want to have your friends visit. Or as administrators, if you want to prevent saying, the people you may have to monitor them, watching them to see if they, pass each other joints or some kind of paraphernalia or something like that. I don't know. But is there strict rules when it comes to like visitation on friends, relatives, whoever?
Yeah, I mean, we do try to provide a safe environment for the residents, an environment where, things like that aren't gonna be a temptation. So as you go through the program and as you make progress through the program, the restrictions become less and less, and you are given more and more freedom. That being said, when you first get in the program, visits are, I wouldn't say monitored, but you're accompanied by a servant leader when you go on a visit, just to provide some accountability there. And, as far as your friends visiting, it just depends on who your friends are, and it depends on, every situation to a degree is unique, but each resident that comes through the program has what we call a sponsor. Now, this isn't a sponsor in the NA and AA sense. This is a sponsor, someone who agrees to support you emotionally, financially while you're in the program. And it's also someone that we can contact who has your best interest in mind and who we can say, hey, Steve has a friend who wants to come and visit. Is this someone we should allow him to have contact with? And generally speaking, we're able to kind of weed out people that aren't necessarily healthy visitors for that person.
I see. I would assume, too, that a program like His Mansion would probably have like a list of stuff saying, do not bring these items when you come to be a resident of His Mansion. Cell phone use. I know of a facility that was like a suicide prevention type thing where they didn't allow the people to have like cell phones. They kept them locked up. And I know a lot of like kids waste their time on, texting and going on the social media, Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. It seems like even if they're like at a meal or something like that, they're fiddling on their cell phones while everybody's trying to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Is there any rules when it comes to cell phone usage?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that to answer your question,
sure,
there's a broader reality along the lines of what I said before in terms of shaping their environment and providing structure to what they experience. And one of those things is not having access to social media, internet, and really their phone use is fairly structured as well. There's a phone within each dorm that they're allowed to use for a specific amount of time, given how far along in the program they are. But otherwise, they're not really allowed to have any of those distractions. And I think a lot of them end up saying how much they enjoy not having the distraction.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's a blessing more so than, I think the cell phone usage can be a curse more so than a blessing too. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of great information, granted, but a lot of people get ridiculous on them. But Anywho, so just out of curiosity, what would you say is the hardest part about recovering from addiction? Just
I mean, for me, the hardest part about recovering from addiction is, you kind of have to face the wreckage of your past. And for a lot of people, that's what really keeps them sick. Addiction is a form of escape. And the harder reality is to face, the more tempting it is to retreat into whatever your drug of choice might be. So, as you grow older and as your addiction becomes worse, that's the shame of addiction fuels the addiction itself. So it can be a pretty vicious cycle. And the other thing is, I mean, I don't know if you would call this the hardest part about recovering from addiction, but the thing that you need the most in your life to recover from addiction is a relationship with Christ. And a lot of people will say, even in secular circles, a reliance upon a higher power is an absolute necessity, and spirituality is a necessity. But I would go one step further than that and say what's truly needed is a relationship with Christ. And through that, all people can be healed, not just someone suffering from substance abuse, but someone who does suffer from trauma or depression. I think that, Christ is what's missing in the relationship that is formed when you really open yourself up to that possibility has a profound transformative effect on not just your life, but the lives of those around you and the way that you see the world.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, and I would say from my vantage point and what I've seen in people is it's interesting how I think people tend to view addiction in one of two ways. One is the responsibility all falls on the addict. So they're the ones that are in the wrong. They need to just kind of quit it and change. Or like the responsibility is all on other people and all on their circumstances, which I think it's both. And what I've seen, the men and women that I've seen, that kind of moment of like most difficulty is both taking responsibility for what they've done and also facing the reality of what's been done to them and the pain that it's caused.
And it's interesting, like the people I've seen, like on shows, like to promote, like Alcohol Anonymous. I guess when they stand up and give their testimony, they say, my name is Frank, and I am an addict to alcohol. It seems like no matter how sober you are, let's say you're sober for 10 years, it's like that you could get back into alcohol if you're not careful and cognizant of your situation. And if you don't have a support group to help you out, that you can get in there without even thinking about it. So.
And I would say I think that's true for everybody when it comes to all of our different sins of choice, if you will.
All right.
That we're all susceptible in a moment to fall into temptation. And we really try and resist against the cultural defining of I'm an addict, she's an addict. It's a very defining thing, and we really try and push people to define themselves by the fact that they're loved by the Lord and that they're following Christ and that that's the truest thing about them. And yes, they have temptation, but they're not defined by it.
Okay. So how we met? Well, I don't know if any of you were there that day on that Friday at Soulfest, the Christian Music Festival. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I met you personally that day.
I do remember meeting you.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah. Okay. But you two gentlemen weren't there that day.
No.
Okay. So did you, no, out of being in ministry for like 48 years or so, that was the first time you had a display table at Soulfest?
No, we had gone in the past a few times.
Oh, okay.
But we hadn't been there for probably 2 or 3 years. And it was only, spotty here and there that we went, not consistently.
Oh, okay. So would you say your time this past year was successful as far as like visibility, goals, and objectives goes?
I was very happy with the outcome. I mean, it was a beautiful weekend. A lot of people came by, stopped, they were interested. There's a lot of people who are very interested in finding help for loved ones or even themselves who are struggling with addiction. And so people came by quite often that were expressed an interest in that. And we followed up with all of those folks, and we followed up with you. We're here today just to spread the word even more.
So was I the only government accessed TV producer that approached your table?
That I know of, yes.
Okay. So barring any unforeseen circumstances, do you think you'll have a display table at Soulfest 2020 next August?
I don't know yet. It's a possibility, but that decision hasn't been discussed yet.
Okay. And my last question about Soulfest, did any of you people go on the zip line down Gunstock Mountain?
We
No, I
did
did
not. We did not. We wanted to, but
I would think now that's run by Gunstock. I don't think it's run by Soulfest. So I would assume you have to pay a pretty penny to get a ticket. And
yeah, the ticket was actually covered more than the zip line. It covered a number of wonderful activities, and it was about $100. But we were there to man the booth, not
Yeah.
to spend the day playing. So
yeah.
I think if we had gone back for a day just to play, we would have done that. But
Oh,
unfortunately,
okay.
we couldn't take advantage of it this time.
Okay. So, now your his mansion isn't like a government or state agency, so you rely like on contributions from like individuals and churches,
That's correct.
and you offer on your website PayPal options, electronic fund transfers, checks. And it could either be like one-time donations or reoccurring donations.
Right. We're glad for anyone who has an interest or a passion for this ministry and seeing Christ and the gospel brought to people who are struggling. Be a participant with us by investing into eternal purposes.
Okay. And after like 48 years as a ministry, has there been ever like any talk on like expanding his mansion ministries to cover more people, serve more people, or cover a bigger area?
There have been different seasons. Maybe Heidi could talk more about it in terms of there have been instances when we have done that and kind of pulled back from that, but I don't know if you have more detail about that.
Well, there was a point, I think it was in the 80s, where we had a number of recovery homes around the country, one in the Bahamas and some other places that we were encouraging. And then we just realized that we didn't have the number of staff and the talent needed to man all of that and do it well. So we just streamlined and focused our energies to where we are right now. And not to say that we wouldn't be doing that again in the future, but yeah, that would just require a different structure, administrative-wise, from what we have currently.
Okay. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned this before, that you have, you're a non-denominational, like, a faith type base. You don't belong to like one particular congregation per se.
That's correct.
You just like when you have like spiritual talks, you probably quote the Bible, but not necessarily from a Baptist, Pentecostal, Catholic, or a one denominational type faith.
I mean, I would say that we're broadly evangelical, Protestant. So I don't know if that kind of narrows us down a little bit. We talk a lot about Jesus. We talk a lot about the gospel and the grace of God. in Jesus, and we talk a lot about the Bible. So that kind of those are the things that define us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, getting back to one thing we were talking about. What's an average day like in at His Mansion Ministries? So you like for like the exercise portion, you have like chores like chopping wood and slopping pigs and cows and that type of thing.
I mean, I'm not sure I would call it the exercise portion. I think when people are experiencing the hard things that you experience when you recover from things like drug addiction, it's important to have something different to focus on and also to stay busy. So while people are unpacking the emotional baggage of their past in class one day, it's a good idea for them to be able to also be busy, work with their hands. You know, a lot of guys, and probably the women too, you know, need a little bit of help with their work ethic from time to time. And it's important to stay busy and to stay productive. And it's even more important to stay busy and stay productive when you're learning a new way of living. So I don't necessarily think that I would call it the exercise portion of the program, but there is a work element to the program. And we have a number of things on the property that people do. Some people, we get timber in the raw and, you know, cut it into 3-foot lengths. We have a hydraulic splitter where we split the wood. All the buildings on the property, I think most of the buildings on the property are heated through wood burning boilers. So that's also a way that we're good stewards of the donations that we're giving in order to keep the ministry running. And it's also something productive that the residents can do, you know, while they're not in class in order to keep themselves busy and productive. So there's a bunch of things that, like you said, we've got a few animals and there are some gardens and there are a lot of different things that we work on to try to stay busy and stay productive.
Okay. But nothing like a bicycling or hiking or anything like that.
Well, we have lots of hiking around us, and we're on a near mountain.
Oh.
So people will go for walks and go hiking, but it's not like a program part. It's not part of the program.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we see that exercise is really supposed to be a product of work on some level. I know we tend to sit at desks a lot nowadays, but that exercise is a byproduct of work, which is hopefully a byproduct of love. And so that's really what we think in terms of them working is they're loving the community, they're loving the people in the community. So.
Speaking about healthy exercise, the snow shoveling season is coming up right around the corner.
That's true. Yeah.
So plowing and shoveling, that's an exercise right there.
Sure, and that's a good example of something that the residents do. Not only the residents, the staff do as well. In order just to, you know, practically speaking, it has to get done. So, but that's another thing that the residents will do to stay productive during work crew. Yeah.
Okay. So, wow. So time flies when you're having fun. Hey, Heidi.
Yeah, it sure does.
Wow. My producer just informed me that we've got about 14 minutes or so left. And I've just exhausted all my questions. So is there anything that we've talked about in this past time here that you'd like to elaborate on? Or something I didn't bring up which you'd like to bring up at this point? Anybody?
I could share a little bit more about our Servant Leader program.
Yes.
We talked a lot about our resident program, which is for men and women that are coming for help in particular. From some sort of life-controlling issue. The Servant Leader program is for men and women, similar age range, who really have a passion or desire to care for and love people that are in the midst of that journey of recovery and growth. The Servant Leader program is a year-long program, similarly to the residential program. It's both a program that's oriented for learning and being trained in discipleship and mentoring and leadership, as well as an opportunity for people to grow and find their own healing in community, learning to love each other. So we have a class that we have once a week. They get weekly one-on-one mentoring. We have retreats, different opportunities for them to serve more practically. So that's a little bit about the Servant Leader program alongside of our resident program.
Okay, I just thought of a question. I lied here. I just thought of one more question. One way that a person can get eliminated from entering the His Mansion program, if they're 18 through 35 with kids, if they're single parents, their kids can you accommodate their kids as well as them?
Yeah, we don't have a place for the children, but oftentimes we will have parents come who have left their children with family members or friends to take care of, so that they themselves can become a good parent. So that's not an unusual thing at all.
Oh, okay. Okay. But if they're in that program for 1 year, well, then again, when you talk about visitation rights, I'm sure they can visit their kids or the kids can visit them in any time. That would be a safe relative to have visit them. And
right, if somebody has children, they also have some increased privileges on the phone as well, so that they can talk to their kids some more.
Okay. So, Heidi or Abe, do you have anything that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about earlier, or something new that's coming up that might be of interest to my TV audience, as well as the internet audience? They'll see this afterwards, or...
Well, I'd just like to add to what Dave was saying about the Servant Leader program, and because from my own personal experience, it did, I grew an incredible amount, and just being able to serve the kind of hurting men who come through a program like that really changed. Well, it's changed my life, and it's also changed my perspective on what life is all about. The servant leaders who come and we get a wide variety of servant leaders. Some of them are guys like me who have been through the program, who are coming out of a lifestyle of addiction or any of the other kind of life-controlling problems that lead you into a program like that. And a lot of people just come to serve from all kinds of different backgrounds as servant leaders. And it's an incredible thing to watch people sacrifice a year of their life, or maybe in some cases more, to take on the very, very, and a lot of times it's a very difficult task of serving the men and women who come to a program like this. Because needless to say, I mean, the people who come in are beautiful, often hurting people, but there also are times when people have a difficult time adjusting to the structure of the program, and you can run into difficult personalities from time to time. So it's not an easy job. It's a challenge, and it was something that really, in a very real way, defined who I've become, or defined who I'm becoming. And taking on a challenge like that will really grow you up quickly and grow you in ways that you really haven't experienced before.
Okay. And I just thought of another question. And the reason I've been avoiding this question is because I can't pronounce the word. Recidivism. What is your success rate of people who go through your program and you might go back? I would assume it's pretty good if you have a vetting system, interviewing them 2 separate times, that you want to have a good match of them coming in and you wanting to have them come in. So I would assume your recidivism rate is excellent.
We haven't actually measured it scientifically. We are currently going through an analysis where we're having residents take surveys, and we started that about a year ago. And Wheaton College, actually, where David graduated from, they're going to be going through that and helping us understand specifically how we're doing. But what we've just observed, we would say like a 60, 70% success rate in the way that you're describing it. Another way of describing success, though, too, is that every single person who has come through the program has been introduced to the Lord Jesus Christ and has heard the gospel. And God's word never returns void for the purpose for which he intends it. And so even when people fall back into sin or struggle with sin, it doesn't mean it's the end, that that's what their lifestyle is going to be. There's the hope of the gospel that that can take root and produce fruit, whether immediately or in the future. So our hope really is in Jesus Christ, but we are measuring it for the future so that we can have a more specific answer.
So after the 1 year that they go through the His Mansion ministry program, is there a transitional aspect of it where you like keep in touch, you keep correspondence with, or they network with other graduates, or?
They do it on an informal basis. Yeah, we don't really have the staffing to make an alumni program, so to speak. But there's a lot of staff and servant leaders who are still in contact with one another.
Yeah, and I would say it would be ideal if we were to have a more structured post-care program. At the same time, we really believe that we're a service to the local church, and we see that we're sending our residents to the local church for the local church to be there, to be that post-care ministry, if you will. So it's not sufficient entirely. I mean, in terms of, it would be great if we had something, but that's really our heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and as I mentioned earlier, since His Mansion ministry relies like mostly on individual or church contributions, the people coming in then under no financial obligation to like pay a tuition or something like that to go through the His Mansion program.
Right. We don't charge for our services. It's free room and board. There is an application fee, some deposits up front, like for a medical deposit, travel deposit, but those deposits are refundable if they're not used. And no one is ever turned away for lack of funds, ever.
Okay. So I can't think of anything else. So if this show has been a blessing to you, please contact on the internet hismansion.com and find out more about this program. Or if this has really been a blessing and you have the resources to contribute financially, I'm sure they'll welcome that as well on the donation option. And other than that, all I can say is please join us next time for another episode of Frankly Speaking. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Frank.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.